Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. So, today I want to do something different. We're going to do an iceberg. I've never done one before, and I hope I'm doing it at least a little bit correctly. But today I want to talk about glamorized killers because I have noticed that they have been abundant in recent years in movies, in shows, and on social media. So let's talk about them. We will start at the top of the iceberg with Ted Bundy. So, Ted Bundy was a serial killer and a perpetrator of SA, and he admitted to killing 30 women in the 1970s, though some experts believe his actual victim count might be over 100. So, he was born Theodore Robert Bundy on November 24th, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont. His mother, Louise Cowell, was 22 years old and unmarried when she delivered him at a women's shelter. Later, Cowell brought her son to her parents in Philadelphia. Ted's birth certificate lists his father as unknown, so his biological father's identity might never be confirmed. To hide the fact that he was an illegitimate child, Bundy was raised as the adopted son of his grandparents and was told that his mother was his sister. Cowell moved with her young son to Tacoma, Washington, and in 1951 she married Johnny Bundy, whom Ted did not respect as a father figure. Ted showed an early interest in the macabre, becoming fascinated with knives at age 3. As a child, he would pick apart mice in the woods and try to drown people while boating or swimming. As a teen, he began peering into people's windows, and he would steal things that he wanted without any remorse. He graduated from the University of Washington in 1972, and it was at the University of Washington that he dated Diane Edwards. Now, he mysteriously cut all contact with Edwards in 1974, and around this time, he started his killing spree of young women. Now, in the fall of 1974, Bundy moved to Utah to attend law school, and here he began his killing spree, or continued it rather. He began dating Elizabeth Klepfer, whose interviews with police in 1975 helped in apprehending Bundy, whom they eventually found and pulled over one day while he was out driving. So the police searched his vehicle and they found a bunch of burglary tools, a crowbar, a face mask, rope, and handcuffs. And he was arrested for possession of these tools, and it was then that the police began to link him to the murders that were going on in the area. So, Bundy was arrested in the kidnapping of Carol Duranch, one of few women to escape his clutches, and he was convicted and received a 1 to 15 year jail sentence. He escaped from jail twice in 1977, at one point dropping more than 30 pounds to crawl through an opening he made in the ceiling, which is just wild. And after his second escape from prison, he made his way down to Tallahassee, Florida. And this is where it all comes to a head for Bundy. So on the night of January 14th, 1978, Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. He attacked 4 of the young female residents and killed 2 of them, Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy. On February 9th, Bundy kidnapped and murdered a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach. These crimes marked the end of his murderous rampage, as he was soon pulled over by the police later that month. Now, the most damning evidence connecting Bundy to the 2 Chi Omega murders at FSU were bite marks on Levy's body, which were a definitive match to Bundy. In July of 1979, he was convicted for the murders of Bowman and Levy, and he was given the death penalty twice. He spent 9 years on death row appealing his sentence. In 1980, Bundy received another death sentence for Leach's murder. It was this sentence that ultimately led to his execution by electric chair in 1989. So, In terms of how he was glamorized, Ted Bundy was seen as handsome and charming, and this caused him to become something of a celebrity during his trial because it was maybe perceived he can't be that bad because he doesn't fit what people might think of when they think of someone deranged. So, yeah, he was seen as charming and well put together and handsome and all this, and that would translate years later into the 2019 Netflix movie Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile, starring Zac Efron. So the film doesn't exactly portray Bundy as extremely wicked, shockingly evil, or vile, because we have a very handsome actor playing him, which was criticized, and the film was also criticized for failing to address the impact of Bundy's crimes on his victims' loved ones. Jeffrey Dahmer was an American serial killer who took the lives of 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. He was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on May 21st, 1960, to Lionel and Joyce Dahmer. From a young age, Dahmer developed a fascination with animal bones and studied how to clean and preserve them. As a child, he collected large insects and the skulls of small animals preserved in jars of formaldehyde. Dahmer started drinking at age 14, and by the time of his first killing at age 18, his alcohol consumption had spiraled out of control. He dropped out of Ohio State University after one quarter term, and his recently remarried father insisted that he join the army to get straightened out. Dahmer enlisted in late December 1978 and was posted to Germany shortly thereafter, but he was discharged for his alcoholism. Following his discharge from the army, Dahmer returned home to Ohio. An arrest later that year for disorderly conduct prompted his father to send Dahmer to live with his grandmother, Catherine Dahmer, in Wisconsin. But his alcohol problem continued, as did his run-ins with the law. Dahmer's first murder occurred just after graduating from Revere High School in June 1978, when he picked up an 18-year-old hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks and took him home to his parents' house. Dahmer proceeded to get the young man drunk, and when Hicks tried to go, Dahmer wouldn't let him because he didn't want him to leave. Dahmer killed him by striking him in the head and strangling him with a barbell. He dismembered the corpse, packing the body parts in plastic bags, and he buried them behind his parents' home. He later exhumed the remains, crushed the bones with a sledgehammer, and scattered them across a wooded ravine. It wasn't until September 1987 that Dahmer took his second victim, Stephen Twomey. Stephen Twomey and Jeffrey Dahmer checked into a hotel room and they drank, and Dahmer eventually awoke to find Twomey dead, with no memory of the previous night's activities. Dahmer bought a large suitcase to transport Twomey's body to his grandmother's basement, where he dismembered and, let's just say, violated the corpse before disposing of the remains. He kept Twomey's head, which was wrapped in a blanket, for weeks after the murder. On May 27, 1991, Dahmer's neighbor Sandra Smith called the police to report that an Asian boy was running naked in the street. When the police arrived, the boy was incoherent, and they accepted the word of Dahmer, a white man in a largely poor black community, that the boy was his 19-year-old lover. In fact, the boy was 14 years old, and was, unbeknownst to Dahmer, the younger brother of a Laotian teen Dahmer had molested 3 years earlier. Dahmer's killing spree ended when he was arrested on July 22, 1991. 2 Milwaukee police officers were led to Dahmer when they picked up Tracy Edwards, a 32-year-old black man who was wandering the streets with handcuffs dangling from his wrist. They decided to investigate the man's claims that a strange person had drugged him and had restrained him. They arrived at Dahmer's apartment, where he calmly offered to get the keys for the handcuffs. Dahmer's trial began in January 1992. Dahmer initially pleaded not guilty to all charges despite having confessed to the killings during police interrogation. He eventually changed his plea to guilty by virtue of insanity. His defense then offered the gruesome details of his behavior as proof that only someone insane could commit such terrible acts. The jury chose to believe the prosecution's assertion that Dahmer was fully aware that his acts were evil and chose to commit them anyway. On February 15, 1992, they returned after approximately 10 hours deliberation, and they found him guilty, but sane on all counts. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms in prison, with a 16th term tacked on in May. Dahmer was killed on November 28, 1994, by his fellow prison inmate, Christopher Scarver. Dahmer's story was dramatized in various movies and TV shows in the late 2010s and early 2020s, most notably 2017's My Friend Dahmer, chronicling Dahmer's time at school before becoming a killer, and Netflix's Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, which chronicles his entire life and killing spree. My Friend Dahmer received some criticism for casting a handsome former Disney Channel star, Ross Lynch, in the role of Dahmer, as if to make him seem more appealing. The Netflix show is a season of an anthology series about killers. The show was controversial for dredging up bad memories for Dahmer's victims' families, who did not give consent to be portrayed on the show. Further, Netflix came under fire for initially placing the show under the genre of LGBTQ. The categorization was lambasted for its implication, namely that Dahmer's sexuality was related to his psychopathy. I can't help but imagine that Netflix's true intention was to try to humanize Dahmer as someone who was struggling because of society's rejection of his sexuality and his consequent loneliness. The Menendez brothers, Eric and Lyle, were the subjects of Netflix's next season of their monster anthology series. The brothers are infamous for shooting their parents, Jose and Mary Louise Kitty Menendez, at their Beverly Hills home on the night of August 20th, 1989. Jose's life was ended almost instantly. His body was torn to shreds and he was explosively decapitated, leaving him mangled and unrecognizable. Kitty tried to crawl away during the shooting, but was delivered a final fatal shot to the cheek. After the shooting, the brothers sat and waited, expecting the police to show up because of the noise. When no one came, they left the house. The brothers went to a movie theater and tried to buy tickets to Batman to use as their alibi. But the theater worker informed them that they could not sell them tickets to a movie more than 20 minutes after it started. They bought tickets to a later showing, hoping the tickets wouldn't be time-stamped, but when they were, they abandoned the plan entirely. Lyle called the police to report the death of his parents, acting as if he'd come home to find them lifeless, crying crocodile tears and saying he suspected the mob might have been responsible due to his father's business dealings with them. Eric and Lyle, whose parents were fabulously wealthy, inherited their fortune. Lyle hired a computer expert to delete their father's recently updated will, to ensure all their parents' money went to them. Eric and Lyle went on a spending spree, which drew suspicion that they killed their parents for money. What also drew suspicion was the fact that Eric wrote an amateur screenplay with his classmate, Craig Signorelli, called Friends, a story about a rich young man who kills his parents in the perfect murder for the inheritance money. Eric eventually confessed to his psychologist, Jerome Oziel, who then told his mistress, Judalon Smith. Oziel began recording his sessions with Lyle and Eric. After breaking up with Oziel, Smith informed the police about the brothers' involvement in the murders. Lyle was arrested on March 8, 1990, outside their Beverly Hills home, while Eric turned himself in 3 days later after returning to Los Angeles from Israel. Both were held without bail and jailed separately at the Los Angeles County Jail. The brothers had 2 trials, the first of which ended in a mistrial due to a deadlocked jury. The defense argued that the brothers were acting in self-defense due to years of physical abuse, emotional abuse, and SA at the hands of their parents, their father especially. The prosecution argued that the way the brothers acted was inconsistent with self-defense, and that the SA allegations were fabricated. Both brothers were eventually convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances for lying in wait, as well as conspiracy to murder. In the penalty phase of the trial, they were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After a series of failed appeals over the years, in May 2023, the brothers requested a new hearing based upon an allegation that their father had molested former Menudo boy band member Roy Rossello, who at that time was signed under RCA Records, for which Jose was the CEO. Specifically, on April 18, 2023, on a segment of The Today Show about a television documentary, Rossello stated that when he was 14 years old, he was drugged and violated by Jose Menendez while he was visiting the Menendez family's home in New Jersey. The appeal cites a letter that appears to have been written by Eric to his cousin, Andy Cano, in 1988, where Eric talked about the abuse. On October 3, 2024, Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon announced in a press conference that his office was actively reviewing the appeal. On October 24, 2024, Gascon announced he was asking the court for a resentencing of the case. If a judge accepts his recommendation, the brothers will be eligible for parole. A resentencing trial is set to take place in January 2025. The Netflix show brought new attention to the case and the abuse the brothers suffered, and it may very well help the public see them more sympathetically and help them become eligible for parole. However, the show was criticized for its portrayal of the brothers and their relationship, over-sexualizing them and portraying them as incestuous. Brian Thompson, the CEO of the American health insurance company United Healthcare, was fatally shot in Midtown Manhattan, New York City, on December 4, 2024 by 26-year-old Luigi Mangione. The shooting occurred early in the morning outside an entrance to the New York Hilton Midtown Hotel. Thompson was in the city to attend an annual investors meeting for United Health Group, the parent company of United Healthcare. Prior to his death, he faced criticism for the company's rejection of insurance claims, and his family reported that he had received death threats in the past. The words delay, deny, and depose were inscribed on the cartridge cases used during the shooting. Mangione fled the scene but was apprehended on December 9th and was charged with ending Thompson's life in a Manhattan court. Authorities said Mangione was carrying a 3D printed pistol and a 3D printed suppressor consistent with those used in the attack, as well as a short handwritten manifesto criticizing the American healthcare system, an American passport, and multiple fraudulent IDs, including one with the same name used to check into a hostel on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Authorities also said his fingerprints matched the partial smudged prints that investigators found near the New York shooting scene. Police believe that he was inspired by Ted Kaczynski's manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, and motivated by his personal views on health insurance. They say an injury he suffered may have played a part as well. Mangione was arraigned in Altoona on December 9, 2024. After waiving extradition in Pennsylvania, he appeared in a federal court in New York City on December 19th. On December 23rd, he was arraigned in the New York Supreme Court, and he pled not guilty to New York state charges. Mangione has been indicted on 11 state charges and faces 4 federal charges. The charges include first-degree murder, murder and furtherance of terrorism, criminal possession of a weapon, and stalking. He is eligible for the death penalty. Mangione has been called a folk hero, and he's been celebrated as a vigilante by some of the general public. Mangione has also been noted for his perceived physical attractiveness. The McDonald's where Mangione was arrested was review bombed as a result of a tip from a customer who alerted an employee after recognizing the suspect. Mangione also enjoys a lot of support on social media. In fact, I was inspired to create this video when I saw this image of Mangione being compared to Jesus. What's unique about Mangione is he was not glamorized by being portrayed by a handsome actor or given a show where he is put in salacious scenes or even depicted sympathetically. His glamorization happened via social media, in real time, reacting not to actors or dramatizations, but to the killer himself, and the real event that happened where he murdered Brian Thompson. It just goes to show that the more we can understand a perpetrator's motives, the more glamorized they seem to become. From Bundy's charm making him seem not so bad, to Dahmer coming across as simply a struggling gay man who was lonely, to the Menendez brothers who now receive more sympathy as victims rather than killers of their parents, to now Mangione, who people perceive as fighting on behalf of us all. At the end of the day, maybe we can see something positive in these killers, because they are all human like us, something we can sometimes forget, though we never should. Thanks for watching, you guys. Stay safe out there, and remember, don't get scared out of sorts.